Hello, everybody.
There's Hank.
We have the presenters, and we will not be seeing the members of the audience. Linda, can you tip the screen a little bit toward you? Yeah, that's better. Okay, so we're all here. Hector will be joining us. He was on just a little while ago. Hector Badia with the Office of Capital Improvements. So we'll jump right in. I want you to know I put on a bow tie. I never do that. Never mind what I'm wearing underneath my shirt. I mean, below my shirt. I do have pants on. But I read somewhere that people working at home are starting to get so sloppy that their bosses are taking them to task. So I thought I'd be extra neat today. This webinar, which is going to end promptly at 5 p.m., and excuse any technical glitches that we have with it, please, is being hosted by the Coconut Grove Village Council and the Coconut Grove Spotlight, which is a regular newsletter that goes out to the community that is supported and is an outgrowth of the Village Council. I am Hank Sanchez Resnick. I am the visibility chair for the Coconut Grove Village Council. And we have, you can see on the screen, I think to my left is Marcelo Fernandez, the chair of the council, and to my right, with my wife walking around in the background, is Linda Williams, the vice chair of the council. We have also with us, in addition to Commissioner Russell, Hector Badia, who is the acting director of the Office of Capital Improvements for the city, and Jorge Mora, who is the assistant director of the Office of Capital Improvements. Did I get that right, Jorge? Jorge, you're muted. Anyway, I'm pretty sure I got that right. So why don't we jump right in? We have a lot of questions. We're going to stop promptly at 5 p.m. The commissioner has another town hall meeting right after this. So we need to get going. We will, we have a lot of questions that were submitted and some that the Village Council developed. By the way, in the background for me is a virtual background that I'm not sitting in the panorama restaurant of the hotel. Anyway, so we have a lot of questions, almost certainly too many to deal with. So we're going to jump right in. We have them divided by category, and I think we'll start with some COVID-19 questions, and then we're going to get into some capital improvements questions, since the staff people, Hector and Jorge, have an awful lot going on in their department, and they're very busy, and they may have to leave the meeting, which is quite okay. So let's start with the first question. The impact of, the topic is the impact of COVID-19 on the community. Marcelo?
I can't hear.
Yeah,
Marcelo.
I lost.
Yeah, I can't hear.
Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So the first question, I think, is regarding COVID-19 to Commissioner Russell. What have you been hearing about the impact on the community, as far as, who do you think is hurting the most, being affected by this?
Sure. Well, and thanks really quickly to the Village Council for putting this together. I know it's been a tough time for everybody, but I'm really proud of this city right now. We can say that nobody who has passed away in the city of Miami due to any lack of capacity from beds or ventilators. And that's really the objective of all the shelter-in-place order and everything that's been done to make sure that hospitals have the capacity to service the needs that they can, and they have. So we've really done our job on that. but it has taken a toll. Within the Grove, my biggest finger on the pulse, or my best finger on the pulse, is through the bid and all of the restaurants and retail that operate in the center area of the Grove. I know there's other business beyond, and I've been in touch with them as well. The restaurants who have decided to stay open have not regretted it. It's been tough on them, but they've been able to keep some staff moving, some cash flowing. It's been a minuscule fraction of their common business, but to a T, the ones that I've spoken with at least have said it was the right thing to do, not only for the community, but for their own business. And as you know, some of the businesses who had closed early are starting to come back online that are allowed to under the current shelter at home. So beyond those businesses, retail's taking.
You were muted.
Yeah, Ken, you just got muted.
We lost your sound, Ken. You need to unmute.
Apply for unemployment. So the city has come with its own version of the federal programs to help from our end in our own capacity and what we can. This is not coming from the general fund for the most part. These funds are community development block grant funds, which we get from the federal government, but could otherwise be spent on other initiatives. We have a small business assistance program. We have a micro enterprise grant. It's sort of a PPP. Both of them are meant to keep people employing their employees, and the benefits come for them keeping those employees on staff. And we also have a consulting contract, basically free consulting to any business owner in the city of Miami who's trying to apply to any one of the federal programs under the CARES Act, PPP, Small Business Administration, you name it. So all of those are available, and you can get to all of those through my office at krussell@miamigov.com. Beyond that, the residents have their own level of stress that we've been trying to deal with. While crime is down citywide, as you may have heard, we had the longest period without a homicide in over 50, 60 years, which is really something special. But suicides are up, domestic violence is up, and these are issues with regard to stress in the home and being kept in home. For some people, that's not a good thing. So I hope I answered that question. If there's any follow-up to that, let me know.
Okay. Next question, Linda. I'm unmuting you.
Okay, am I okay?
Yes.
Great. The next question, what is your sense of and when Coconut Grove will come back from this crisis? Do we have a time frame, 2 months, July?
Thank you,
4?
Linda. Thanks for asking, and it's good to see you. There's a lot of confusion out there because the county has moved forward today, actually, with marinas and parks,
Right.
but the city did not. And the reason for that is we are not yet in a phase 1 criteria for our declining level of positive cases. That is not something that we decide as a city, nor as the county. This is a state designation through the Department of Health. Their epidemiologists tell us when we reach phase 1. So the county is actually moving prematurely at this point. They're opening things. They believe it's safe. They may be right, but they are going before phase 1. They're not making their own phase 1. They're actually going premature to phase 1. The city made a very concerted effort, a very, very conscious decision that we are going to wait until the DOH tells us we're at phase 1. And from that point, we have a 3-phase rollout. Hank, I sent you the PowerPoint, and I apologize it was so last minute, but you can certainly share it with everyone here, if not now, later on. But the basics of that phase 1, we have to get to 14 days of declining positive cases. I've been trying to monitor that at the Department of Health website. It's been tough because the data is really incomplete, and they've actually stopped showing that 14-day running total. They stopped last Friday. So we're very much in the dark here, waiting for the state to tell us. But our mayor has been in touch with the with the Department of Health and the Surgeon General. So we do have a good contact there. that will let us know where we are. But right now, we're not there yet. That's 14 days to phase one. If we get 14 more days in decline, we go to phase two, and the same thing, 14 more days to phase three. So at the minimum, I would say 2 weeks from now, we hit phase one, unless in the dark again, some of that data is showing that we're already in a semi-decline over this week, and that next week becomes our phase one. What phase one looks like: we lift the curfew, the 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. goes away. The shelter in place gets lifted. We have a lot of recommendations, especially for vulnerable population, but you can move about as needed. We would open parks, beaches, and marinas with social distancing guidelines and a lot more monitoring and enforcement and education along with that. And here's the part that's going to be most encouraging to local business. Certain businesses will be allowed to open that are not essential even during phase one. And that pretty much is going to apply to offices and retail, as long as it's the type of business that can be conducted with the 6-foot social distancing. If it's a type of business that simply by its nature cannot adhere to social distancing, it will not be allowed to open. So I've already heard from folks that are in some of those businesses to understand if there is a way that they can open, but that's part of phase one. Those businesses that are able to open, they're going to be limited by their occupancy capacity, the one that's posted on the wall. Whatever their capacity is, they're allowed only 25% of that capacity. Now, this does not include restaurants. I'm going to talk about them in a minute. Nothing changes for restaurants until phase two. But for retail and offices, if a building could hold 100 people in it, it's going to be allowed to hold 25. And that the max limit on that is 125 people. So if you have a 500 person capacity for whatever your business is, you top out at 125, and no building is allowed to have more than 125 in it. Does that make sense? Are there any questions so far on what I've said?
Yes.
So there's a written version of this. I've already sent it to both Marcelo and Hank, so don't feel you need to take notes on everything I'm saying.
And
so-
which I'm doing.
Got it. So alcohol will still be shut down unless it's also a food service. Those that do serve food, it's exactly like it is now. It's takeout and delivery only. No sit down inside or outside. Anything recreational, casinos, card rooms, frontons, racetracks, those are all going to stay closed in phase one. Gyms will stay closed in phase one. Theaters will stay closed in phase one. And so once we get let's just concentrate on phase one for a while, because phase 2 and 3 are where we start to open more things, but that's at least 4 weeks away from now. So phase one, how we open those parks may not be exactly the way the county is doing it. They have very specific rules on singles tennis, but not doubles. They have pages of rules on how you can play golf and things like that. Really, it's just going to be a thoughtful work through with our city manager and our parks director for having the smartest way to allow people to enjoy the fresh air without putting ourselves at risk. In a sense, it's a blessing the county's going before us, because we can see where they make it do the right thing or where they stumble, and make sure that the city doesn't follow any of the mistakes. So we'll see. But as of today, we hear there's no confusion at the boat ramps. The city boat ramps are closed, marinas are closed. And everything seems to be okay for now, but we're going when science tells us to go. It's about data, not about a date. And so that's what's driving our recovery. And in the meantime, it's all about helping those businesses make it through, helping advocate for people who've been put out of a job to get retroactive benefits. The governor has agreed to that, as well as his administration, but they have not put it in writing yet, that unemployment benefits will be retroactive to the date of job loss. So people are still stressed out trying to apply to the system. So that's something I'm advocating on. I don't have a whole lot of control there, but I've drafted a letter that 67 other elected officials have signed, urging the governor to make unemployment benefits retroactive. Sorry, I rambled a little bit there.
Can I just say that, yes, we did receive the PowerPoint, and we will share that. There will be follow-up to this. Some people have commented in the chatting window that they don't see themselves. The only people that you're going to see during this is a webinar. The only people you'll see are people who have been listed as presenters. So it's the people whose names or pictures you already see on the screen right now. So there will be follow-up to this. There will be an email going out to everybody who registered for the webinar, and we'll put it on the Village Council website as well. There's one more question about the COVID-19 impact. Marcelo?
Well, yeah, I think, Ken, you answered the questions, basically how we're preparing for the reopening. And I think having those PowerPoints put out there will kind of give people an indication of what the steps are. So I think you can probably move on to the next question, Hank.
Okay. The next topic is about capital improvement projects. I don't know whether Hector or, oh, Hector, you're there. Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Hector is the acting director of the Office of Capital Improvements. They're in charge of a lot of the major projects that the city is responsible for. So let's talk about the first one on that list is the Dinner Key Marina. A lot of people are asking about that.
Okay, thank you. For those who don't know, the Dinner Key Marina project is the repair of the piers that were damaged during Hurricane Irma. We have mobilized a contractor. He's been working on there for a while. We passed a major hurdle recently with our building department. What you're going to see now is activity in the build out of the utilities on the piers 1, 2, and 3. What you have seen in the past on piers 1, 2, and 3 is is basically the demo of the damages out there. So you'll see progress now moving forward. We're looking at finishing phase 1 by the end of this year, and the project completion we're looking at August of 2021 on that. Now the project, there's 3 phases. As we complete phase 1, the boats in phase 2 will be moved to phase 1, and then we'll initiate construction on phase 2, and then progressively till we finish the project. So I don't know if you have any other questions regarding that.
So when will all of Dinner Key be done?
We're looking at end of summer 2021, August of 2021.
Okay, we have several other projects, and we're going to focus on the Office of Capital Improvements projects right now, so that you guys can go if you need to. And Marcelo, you want to ask about this next
Sure.
one?
Yeah, the Bayshore Drive redesign and rebuild project. Where can Grove residents get information about that project? What's the status of that project, please?
Okay, for those who don't know, the Bayshore Drive project is the reconstruction of South Bayshore Drive from Mercy Way to Darwin Street. That is a Dade County road, which we had partnered in the past with the county. They'll be paying for the improvements on the road, and we'll be doing the design and managing the design and construction. Originally, this was a standard design bid build project. In cooperation with the county, we decided it was best to move forward with what we call the design build project. The design build project is basically that we provide a basic scope. We provide that to a contractor who hires an engineer and designs and builds it at the same. Well, you know, he's responsible for obtaining the permit, designing, obtaining the permits, and building it. We are in the process of working with the county to finalize the terms and conditions of the agreement between us two. Once we finalize that, we can move forward in obtaining a what we call a design criteria professional. It's the initial consultant that prepares the scoping of the project. That process is about 8 months. We're looking at having something on board towards the end of this year. Now,
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you. Hector, at what point would there be resident engagement on that design? When would we be showing the initial draft to the residents where they can give us feedback on the various elements of the design?
in the past, we've had 2 public meetings. We've come to an agreement with the county, what we call the layout of the project. That is available for those who want to see it. when we hire the design criteria professional to finalize that, we'll include public meetings and engage with the public to finalize the scoping on that.
I
That
would
would-
recommend involving the public at the earliest end possible in case there are changes we want to take, that it doesn't upset the entire time flow of the project. Because we have not had one of those public meetings in the last 5 years that I've been in office. And so
Correct.
I think we're basically starting from scratch here in terms of public engagement.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree, Commissioner. As soon as we have the consultant on board, we can go ahead and start having those public meetings.
That'd be great.
Linda, you want to take the next question?
Well, I'm just trying to follow here exactly where we are. It's in blue, right?
No, this would be about the Vyrick Park.
Hello?
I don't
Okay.
see it.
Sorry, I'll just jump in because we all share these questions. We want to know about the timeline for completion of the Vyrick Park swimming pool. That's a project
pool.
that's been going on for several years.
So
Yeah,
this is George Mora, Assistant Director for the Office of Capital Improvement. I work for Hector here. The project has been going on for several years. In February of 2020, the commission authorized additional dollars that were needed because the project has grown to fully fund the project. So that's the good news. We've gotten the funding necessary. We are proceeding to get our final permits. Part of that, the final permits is to go through the city's warrant process, which is going through right now. Approximately more than 70 folks will be noticed regarding the project. Once we go through the warrant process, we can continue and get the final permits that will allow us to go to the construction bidding process, which should start next month. We expect to have a contractor on board and break ground towards the end of this year. Our original goal was to break ground after the summer use of the pool, and I don't know if the pool will be reinstituted this summer or not. So we can expect to have a contractor on board towards the end of this year. What that will do is allow us to go into construction the end of this year. The pool facility will most likely not be in use in 2021 summer, and will be scheduled to reopen in 2022 summer. So that's the current schedule for the pool project.
Thank you.
Okay.
Linda?
Are we going to discuss or go to the next question?
Do you have any further questions about that, Linda?
About the pool? No, that with all that's happened, we know there was a backset, and we were happy to find that there was funding found.
Correct.
And it did push it back, so we anticipated 2022.
Thank you.
Okay, those are the three projects, the Dinner Key Marina, the South Bayshore project, and the Vyrick Park pool that we wanted input from the Office of Capital Improvements about. So we thank you very much for being part of this webinar, and if you want to stay on, that's fine. You may have comments for other topics that we're going to cover, but let's go back now. We're at the top of page 2. So Marcelo, do you want to ask this
Sure.
first?
Yeah, Commissioner Russell, back on April 23rd, it seems like there's a new court date set for the appeal of the Coconut Grove Playhouse. Did that happen, and what's the update, please?
So yes, and thanks for asking. It seems like so long ago. We're in court right now with the county, the city versus the county, regarding whether or not the county should be allowed to demolish the back half of the playhouse. So the HEP board said no. The city commission said yes, which I did not vote for, but I got outvoted. And thankfully the mayor sided with myself and overruled the commission. So the county was not granted the ability to demolish. They are appealing that in court. And so that goes to a very specific type of appeals setting where 3 judges rule over a panel. And we are set for June 16th for oral arguments on that case. So there, you know, that there we can spend a lot of time talking about the facets of the case, but I'll just tell you that the overall, I believe here is a political issue based on leadership within the county. The county mayor is out of office this year, as is many of the commission. And I believe that's going to set the tone for what sort of cooperation we're going to have as a city with the county on the design and plans for the Playhouse leading into the future. So if you are following any candidates for any office, whether it's county commissioner for this district, whether it's county mayor, whatever your opinion is of how the Playhouse should be handled, you should really be advocating to them on that issue. Because once they get into office, it could nullify this entire legal case altogether if we come to some sort of consensus.
Okay, great. Also, I'll continue with one more we have here regarding the crosswalks in Center Grove. There seems to be quite a few of them have been demolished or removed. Do you know, I know some are related to construction, some are not. How can we get some of them put back? And do you know of any plan on what's been done for that?
Yeah, the mysterious disappearing crosswalks. So as a project gets permitted, they get an MOT, which allows them to change how traffic flows and pedestrians flow during their construction period. And for those MOTs, they had to build temporary crosswalks. Some of them actually invested in very robust, beautiful temporary crosswalks, including flashing lights, ADA, you know, sidewalk ramping, and you know, nice striping in the whole 9 yards. But in order for them to get their final permit on their project, they actually need to remove those temporary crosswalks, which seems silly to us who have gotten used to those crosswalks, and it just seems like more safety. But the county manages the flow on all these streets, whether it's a city street or a county street. 27th Avenue in front of the Ritz, for example, is probably the biggest example of one that's disappeared. There's also one in front of Tiger Tail and Mary. Those are all due to that one project that's right there. And as they clear their MOT, they're removing those crosswalks. I've asked our Public Works Department, which manages the city's version of the county's issues on crosswalks, if we can keep those as permanent. And so they are appealing to the county to reinstate the crosswalk on 27th, Tiger Tail and Mary. And I've asked them in the future, when they approve an MOT, why don't they approve an MOT that has a future version of the permanent crosswalk? So whatever the construction is mandated to do, we just leave it there afterwards instead of this back and forth and erasing lines in the road. It causes a lot of stress to people and potentially danger. So I'm in favor of more crosswalks, obviously. So it's all about advocating to the county, and that's what I'm doing.
I'd just like to say I've been very involved in the crosswalk issue, and we're going to have to stay on that because if once they're removed, it's hard to get them put back, but we'll be watching that very closely. Okay. Linda, you want to take this question about the barrier at the end of St. Gaudens?
Okay. Has there been any update on the barrier at the end of St. Gaudens for people to access the bay? The same question applies to the proposed mini park at the end of Royal Road.
Got it. So both of these are rights of way. Neither of them is an official park or green space. So this falls under the Public Works Department, not Capital Improvements and not Parks Department. Neither one of them is an official project of the city. The Royal Road received a grant. A group that many of you advocate for received a grant. The surrounding neighbors are not in favor of the alterations. They seem to want a lot of investment in those roads, improving them, but there seems to be a lot of back and forth on what goes there. At least that's for Royal Road. St. Gaudens Road, there was a barricade put up to keep vehicular access from getting all the way down into the grass and to the water. The unintended consequence of that, pedestrians can still get around, but if you're lugging a kayak or a paddleboard, it's actually become quite difficult. So I've asked staff to take a look at that to see if it can be altered to make easier access for pedestrians, kayakers, paddleboarders, but still, keep cars from getting in there. So that's the current status on either of them. There's no timeline or budget assigned to either of those items at this point.
Marcelo, you want to take the next question?
Yes, sir. So again, Commissioner Russell, there seems to be quite a few of sunken and grounded vessels off Dinner Key and the Spoil Islands. There's also a boat been anchored off Kennedy Park that has trash hanging off it. What's the department takes control of this, and what can the city do about it to get those items cleaned up?
Several years ago, the city had gotten really aggressive on this, and probably too aggressive. They were putting a sticker on a boat and then dragging it right out and crunching it into the garbage bins right at the marina. And some of these were people's homes. As derelict as they may look and as unsanitary as they may be, they got a lot of pushback, and there was a lawsuit that the city settled on. So that caused the city to back off a little bit on how hard and fast they were moving with some of these removals. However, we are under state statute for what we can do. If there is a grounded derelict vessel that is not inhabited, we can put 45-day notice, and then we can remove it. We can have it towed. But most of these are not that case. Most of these people do have people who come either full-time or intermittently, and then it falls under an entirely different category. So if it's a sunken boat completely, and it's a danger to boaters or swimmers, if it's in a channel, we can remove that immediately using city funds. But if it's a little bit out of the way and it's just a bit of an eyesore, we try to save our funds and cobble together different, state and federal grants to remove those vessels. So sometimes it takes a little bit longer. So it's sort of a blend like that. If it's something imminent, we can do it immediately. If there's one that's out there, let me know, and I'll see which category it falls into. But as far as someone who lives on a boat who's just not keeping it well and maybe even causing environmental damage, that's the only grounds we have is to cite them for environmental damage if they're dumping illegally or anything like that into the bay. But we can't force them to have a better looking boat.
And what department is that? Is that code enforcement, or who would we reach
That
out
would be
to?
Marine Patrol would enforce that. If they,
Okay.
they would be the ones out there monitoring, and if they can witness illegal dumping of black water or anything like that, garbage, whatever it might be, they can then cite and take action. But we're not taking people's homes and crunching them like we were before.
Right. Well, I'm going to move quickly over to traffic and mobility, Hank, to keep this thing flowing. We have one more
Yeah.
question here about your position on Villa Woodbine and the private school for boys being proposed. Can you tell us a little about what you know about that?
Sure. There was a good Herald article on that because it was on our agenda this past week. It did get deferred until June 25th, my birthday, take note. Both sides seem to want a deferral. The residents probably want a deferral beyond June 25th because it's going to be the dead of summer where there's not as much advocacy. For our part, we were not willing to take up a quasi-judicial item like this during a virtual process. We simply do not have the technology yet to make sure that whatever decision we make is binding. That's what you really want out of this is a strong decision that holds into the future. And that's the main reason, and I know it sounds like a cop-out, that I cannot state my position on the record prior to that case being heard before me. If I do, I actually bias myself, and whatever the decision is can easily be challenged and taken up to a court of appeals, and it would just undermine the decision that I make. I am very much tuned into this and very aware of the very high hurdles of traffic, trees, and historic preservation that this project presents. And those are going to be the main three issues that we deal with on these appeals to both HEP Board and PZAB as they come. So I cannot give my position on the issue. I can tell you the issues that I care about and that I advocate for, and that I've been listening very intently to everyone involved and all the stakeholders.
Linda's going to take the next question. I just want to say that a lot of people have been commenting in the chat column, and we're going to follow up on this, but we can't answer the chats now. We can't take all those questions now. There isn't time. We're doing pretty well with time. So Linda, the next question.
Okay, Commissioner, after things get back to normal, what can the city of Miami do to reduce traffic in Coconut Grove, particularly all the cars dropping off and picking up for schools? This question assumes we should not just go back to exactly what we were doing before the crisis, which often didn't work well for the community?
Yes, and thanks for that question. So I don't know what normal is going to look like after this, but traffic is going to be traffic. I mean, hopefully we learn from some of these habits and more of us work from home and drive less. But the biggest glut on traffic is the rush hour for schools, primarily on Tiger Tail and then also on Main Highway. For the Main Highway part, before the crisis came about, we had initiated from the City Commission a traffic study for all of South Grove. And really what that was to look at was all of the little tributaries and capillaries that everyone cuts through to get to those schools in order to avoid either Douglas or Lejeune or US 1 or whatever it is. They're going all through the smaller streets. And so we conducted a traffic study on all of those smaller streets. We hired a third-party consultant to go through this. They have completed that study at this point, and they are now going to be making recommendations. We were just at the point where we were going to submit those recommendations to the public and be able to have all sorts of back and forth about that when the crisis happened and we were kind of not able to get together and meet. I'm going to be doing that virtually. I'm going to be sharing the results of that traffic study, which will tell us where we really qualify for and need traffic calming, whether it's a speed bump or a traffic circle or a four-way stop sign or a stoplight or a lower speed limit or more enforcement. The will is definitely there. The big bottleneck to getting traffic calming installed is that it's approved by the county and there's a very high bar for qualifying. You have to go through, all these tests to show how many cars pass through a day and at what speed and different things like that. Our mayor was able to change that through legislation a few years back to make it a little better, but it's still really hard. I found a loophole in it where we can really bring it to commission and waive the process through which, like normally, for example, if you want a speed bump on your street, you need to circulate a petition of your entire community, get over 50% to agree to it, and then we can move forward at least into the design concept. And then both the neighbors across from each side of the speed bump need to agree to it. I really believe that traffic calming is a life safety issue, not really a popularity issue. So I'm willing to forego the petition process. There would still have to be a public hearing notice and commission process to which anyone who's opposed to speed bumps can come and tell us they don't want this. They don't want this on their street or in front of their house or whatever. But I intend to move forward with as much possible for traffic calming devices, especially in the South Grove where the study was done. We have others that are coming in play in the North Grove as well. Some have been put in recently. But really, that's our best bet. I mean, there's no way to get less people to drive or change their habits. But through enforcement and traffic calming, at least we can get them to slow down where it's dangerous for us and our pets and kids.
Can I just say that we have 4 pages of questions and we are now on just going to page 3. So we're not going to get to all the questions. The 2 major categories that we're dealing with right now are traffic and mobility in the Grove, and then the future of Village West. And I think that's all we're going to have time to cover. But there is one about daily life. Several people asked about it, and I'm just going to ask it right now because we're not going to go to page 4 at all. And that's about the recycling. A lot of people are wondering why the recycling was discontinued and when it is going to be continued.
Got it. So we are a little bit short-staffed in the solid waste department. It was projected we would lose 40% of staff during COVID, not because people were hospitalized, but when they have to self-quarantine, for example, because of suspected infection or exposure, they're out of work for 2 weeks. So we anticipated that and adjusted schedule based on that, and it's come to pass. I mean, we are having issues in staffing. We have not laid off anybody at this point at the City of Miami, and we hope not to, based on hopeful federal aid to make our city whole. I cannot stress how much help I'm going to need from the community with regard to advocating for services. What you've even felt with just a slightly reduced garbage schedule is going to be amplified significantly if we have to go into any sort of financial urgency measures, which I do not count on, anticipate, or plan for. I just before this call, I was on for a half an hour with our congresswoman and our state legislators to really fight for the next federal aid package to have a municipal component. which will help make cities whole. We're going to lose a lot of revenue over this next year based on real estate values and lost revenues, not even related directly to COVID expenses. Those are big as well. All these programs we're running and all the PPE we've had to purchase, the testing programs we've put on, the meals programs, these all cost money. But really our fear is on the potential lost revenue if the market drops from a real estate perspective. That's the city's tax base, which funds our services. So that aside, and I apologize because I know you're on the time crunch, I will get back to the garbage. So the solid waste director has a good plan in mind, but I don't know if it's been communicated well enough that everyone has confidence in what's going on. So he eliminated the recycling day, telling everyone to commingle everything in your green bins and put everything out on your green bin days. So your green bin days continued. He just removed the recycling days. But he has assured me that he is working with a contractor, a third party to the city, that does not put anything into the landfill. What happens is those commingled bins are all taken to the facility. They are then sorted for both ferrous and non-ferrous recycling. That's metal and plastic recycling. And so those are separated, and everything else is produces waste to energy. So he is very confident that we are doing an environmentally sound practice, that recycling is still happening, but he's having to do it on a reduced manpower schedule. So hopefully we get back to normal here. He's also reduced the bulky waste pickup to once every 2 weeks now, and he's issuing a mailer this week, which will go to all Grove residents, saying what zone you're in and what day of the month you get what days of the month you get your solid waste pickup, your bulky trash. But I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, can we go back to the traffic and mobility questions? The next one, Marcelo, is for you.
Yes. So Commissioner Russell again. So there's been some activity on that gate at the north end of Commodore Trail where it connects to Rickenbacker and the Alice Raymart Park area, which has been locked. And your office, we need to see if we can work with your office to have the county remove the gate so it doesn't keep on happening, because it keeps on happening on a regular basis now. So is that possible to work with the county and get that done, or and get the city to start pushing for that?
Yeah, there's certainly multiple sides. It sounds like the village council is on the side of keeping it open. Is that correct?
Correct.
So, and from my personal perspective, if we're allowing exercise, joggers and cyclists, I would like to see it open so that the flow can continue. The police commander, however, stepped in and said that she is absolutely not able to enforce what's going on over there with regard to cyclists, pelotons, and joggers who are not respecting social distancing. So it was initially a prerogative of the police commander from a safety perspective. She was not able to control that area, and she did not want to allocate more resources to something that's not vital. And so really, because the people that were using it were not behaving properly with regard to social distancing, the commander was advocating for closure. At the end of the day, it's not the city's decision at all. It's a county gate, and it's the county's decision. So I spoke with our county commissioner, and both of us are of the intention to keep it open. But your biggest roadblock to that will actually be the residents, the Grove residents of that neighborhood around Alice Wainwright Park, that Brickell Hammock area, seem to have a pretty strong voice on closing it at this point, because they are bearing the brunt of the litter and the behavior that's happening there that could be putting folks in that neighborhood at risk who are simply trying to walk their dog or be out in their front yard. And so there are two sides to this. Of course, our hope is to keep it open, but we got to keep it open safely. And so we'll want to bring that neighborhood along, and they're not going to come along unless they feel it's going to be done safely with respect to their neighborhood. So I think there could and should be some advocacy probably within the council to that neighborhood as well, some outreach, so that we're all on the same page, because I've been hearing both sides of the issue.
Understood.
Linda, the next question.
Next question, Commissioner. The Bay Walk between City Hall and the dry storage marina to the north has been closed for more than a year. It appears that the Bay Walk cannot be reopened because two of the property owners adjacent to the Bay Walk are engaged in litigation. The attorney for Grove Harbor told the council at our March meeting that it will take at least 10 months to open the Baywalk after the litigation is settled. Why can't the city of Miami order the Baywalk reopened immediately? How is it that two warring developers can deprive all the citizens of Miami of the opportunity to use the Baywalk?
Thank you. And so anyone who knows me knows that the Baywalk is one of my passion projects, honestly, for not only the Grove, but the downtown area, and water access is really, really important to me. You can see a surfboard sitting behind me. That was my way of making a living, was being in the water for years. So I can tell you, though, that I believe there's some misinformation here. From the department's perspective and legal's perspective, I understand that nothing is slowed down based on the litigation. The litigation is causing some issues for them, but it hasn't slowed down the work for repairing the seawall. So the Baywalk was closed for two reasons. One, it was unsafe after Irma. You remember the rusty railing that had fallen in and everything. It was missing a lot of its parts and was dangerous. But beyond that, the closure meant that they were actually getting ready to go into construction on the replacement for Scotty's and Chart House. And so this was a lease that was granted long ago. I mean, this went through litigation on it's city land, but there was leased to be redeveloped for new food and beverage and retail and historic preservation of the hangars before I even came into office. But they have a lease term which allows them certain years on construction. That has not been extended based on whatever lawsuits and problems they're having. So they're still on their same deadlines to get done. But it is their responsibility to build the Baywalk as part of that redevelopment. And so it's one, repairing it from Irma, and two, putting it all together with whatever those two restaurants look like in those designs. So they're still on schedule, but it's about a 24-month process to get the seawall repaired, get the Baywalk done in its new version, which will be an upgraded Baywalk with access to that food and beverage and retail that's going to be there.
Okay, we can move in. The last section of the webinar of the town hall is about Village West. So Marcelo, you've got the first question.
Yes, so let's talk about the NCD, Neighborhood Conservation District. As you all may be aware, we had a revision that was proposed for that to update the code, and it has been deferred. So how will the community be involved in discussions, and what do you think is going forward about bringing the NCD back? What's the timeline look like?
Yeah, so the NCD was dead in the water from a political perspective. It's a shame after, over a year of advocacy, community meetings, planning, coming up with all the little nuanced fixes to the loopholes and problems that were in the NCD that were being exploited, that a counter voice was able to undermine its true intention. Now, it could be said, and this is all political maneuvering, if you will, but to get big legislation like this passed is a process. You don't have to just be right, you have to get your votes. And there were elements of it that were quite controversial. The 50% FLR component was what really ended up undoing us with regard to all the other changes. I bet you could ask the other commissioners what all the different facets of changes with the NCD were, and the only one they're going to know about from their memory is the 50% FLR. The excuse they'll use for not passing it is, well, enforce what you have now, and then we'll think about changing. And it's just a red herring, because simply there's no way for them to enforce something that has loopholes enough that allow people to exploit it legally. You can't enforce it if it has the legal loopholes that allow development to do what we don't intend them to do. So it came back before the commission administratively from a deferral 6 months ago. But I know that the votes are not there. So rather than let it die, I had it deferred again, and I've given direction to the planning department to break it apart, to piecemeal it into smart legislation that takes on, at the very least, the non-controversial items that help us codify what it means for lot splitting, setbacks, heights, these sorts of things, which we seem to have gotten to a consensus on. I believe as a community, there won't be a huge fight over those issues. It really cleans up the code and makes it smarter and more predictable for anyone who wants to build a home. Those parts. And then As far as getting the FLR issue passed, which is really the big one, I believe in my heart the only way that one's going to pass is if it passes by referendum of the Grove. If we put it on a ballot for the Grove, do we want to restrict building within the Grove to 50% FLR? We'll know from our community whether there's an appetite for that, and then it'll be up to the commission. It would be a straw poll ballot. You can't change zoning by vote, by ballot, but you can do a straw poll that shows the commission where the community is on this, and then hopefully we can change the code.
Linda, the next question.
Yes, Commissioner. With regard to the CRA, what will the process and timeline be for establishing the Village West Community Redevelopment Agency, which was authorized by the City Commission at your April 23rd meeting?
Yes,
To be successful, how will it take these funds available for community improvement?
yeah, and thank you for asking. So that was a big step this past week that was passed. For those of you who were watching and know that the city reaffirmed its position that it wants to see the Village West get a CRA. That was an important move. And for those of you who don't know, CRA is Community Redevelopment Agency. It's a taxing district where you take an area of slum and blight that's been neglected from a perspective of infrastructure, green space, historic preservation, and it traps future tax dollars in that neighborhood. The existing tax base still goes to the rest of the city and the county, but future tax dollars can be used to incentivize development in a way that benefits the residents who live there now instead of displacing them through a negative form of gentrification. So it's difficult politically because you're asking the rest of the city and the county not to get those future tax dollars and just to hold them in that area. So for this new commission, because we have new members on the commission, to affirm unanimously they're in favor of this was a big win. And it only happened because residents really showed up at the virtual commission meeting. And I can promise you, without that advocacy, I would not have had the votes. So I really thank the community for coming out. We're kind of where we were 2 years ago, ready to go before the county, all commissioners on board. But at that time, 2 years ago, I read the tea leaves, and similar to the NCD, the politics simply were not there. We would have gone into a gunfight with a knife, and we would have lost the initiative. So I've been working over this last 2 years to find that path, to find those votes at the county level, and we could be on our way. If we keep up the same momentum that the residents have helped with coming out of this last meeting, I hope to have it on a county agenda this summer. If they're willing to take it up during this time of COVID. My argument is that neighborhoods of need are getting hit twice as hard as the rest of the city during COVID and in the COVID recovery. If they had it as rough before COVID, coming out of COVID, where they really need something like a redevelopment agency to jumpstart the right type of development, help with jobs, help with green space, help with historic preservation. If not, we really lose the neighborhood. So I'll let you know as I see it coming onto a county agenda, which will be at the grace of the county chairwoman, Audrey Edmondson. And if it goes on there, then we'll be full hands on deck to get the votes we need at the county commission for the formation. Once it's created, on day one, we can borrow on future TIF. That's the only way this CRA will generate enough funds to be effective on day one and really create the right type of affordable housing, initiatives, infrastructure, and everything. Because otherwise you have to build a TIF slowly over the year. And a TIF is tax increment financing from new taxes. So I'd have to see so much development happen that by the time I've got it to spend, everyone's already been displaced. So instead, we can project that development over the next 10, 15 years, go to the banks and say, based on the future tax revenue we're going to get, we want to borrow today's value of that now. And then we can assign the projects. It wouldn't be a long running, figure this out for 10 years kind of thing. Once we have the budget, the redevelopment plan, the community at the table, an oversight board, then we set the plan in motion, we put out the RFPs, we incentivize the development for what we want it to do, and we're off to the races. So that's the hope. That's the best case scenario, and that's one of my main priorities over the next year.
Thank you. We've got time just for the two more questions. Both are for Linda.
He pretty much answered the next question because we were trying to I've been getting questions from the community at large asking if the 2 years that this was approved 2 years ago, approved unanimously by the city, of course, it never got to the county, could 2 years of taxation from this community be captured? But if you're saying day one, we can borrow going forward any projects that we have, that kind of answers that question, that next question.
Yes.
So the last question, Linda?
Well, what in black? But the one that's in black here,
Yes.
what is the status of the development plans at the site of the Frankie Shannon Roll Center at Douglas Road in US 1?
Got it. And just to finish on that last one, much like the Playhouse, how you feel about the Grove, especially the West Grove and the CRA, should play a big part in how you vote for county commissioner and county mayor, because your commissioner will be really the driving force of that from the county side, and your county mayor has the ability to veto that if they don't like it. So both of those are up for election, and that should come in. You should advocate to them. You should let them know how you feel about it, and it may, if you can get them to lock in a position on that during their campaign, it's very effective for when they get into office. Frankie Shannon Roll Building is right on the corner of Douglas and US 1. It is a county facility for services right now, but the county had a plan to redevelop it. When I got into office, I injected the affordability component into it. The developer agreed. They don't have the funding to do the affordability component of it, but we only gave them the zoning if they would. So they received additional zoning contingent on them doing a massive affordability component to that. So the Frankie Shannon Roll Building will be a tower with affordable housing at all levels, extremely low income, workforce, and market rate. And then it'll also have a grocery store element and what's planned to be a Starbucks element. So really things that we need for the neighborhood. The word I had heard was an Aldi grocery store, so a very attainable grocery store, and also jobs, which would be there, dozens of jobs. And so this is a great project. The Miami Forever bond already allocated over $4 million to this project to help fill their financing gap to get the affordability side kicked in. The county has also brought money, but apparently it's not enough. Honestly, I hear if I understand correctly, they need another $3 to $3.5 million. That can either come from the bond, which is a tough ask because the commissioners have already agreed to put $4 million into this project, or it could come from the CRA when it's established. But from what I understand, that's the only thing that's holding it back right now is funding. Sorry, you might hear my kids hollering in the background.
And we do understand that it will maintain the Frankie Shannon Roll name, and the Human Resource Services will still occupy the ground floor.
Those are county decisions, but that's my understanding, yeah.
That's my understanding. Okay.
Great. Well, that's something really to look forward to. This has been wonderful. Thank you, everybody who participated, especially the commissioner for being the host of the town hall, and our village council members and the staff of the Office of Capital Improvements. There were so many issues that came up, and a lot to be followed up on. The council will be following up, and so will the Coconut Grove Spotlight. And if you aren't subscribing to the Spotlight, I hope you do that. We will be sending a message, an email to everybody who registered for this webinar. So I'm going to press a button and we're all going to disappear. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.